Meeting everyone.
Welcome to the Woollahra Local Planning Panel, public meeting of the 19th of December 2024. My name is David Ryan, I'm the Chair. Joining me today are Peter Brennan, Lincoln Jones as expert members, and Nathan Lane as some of the representatives. And I just want to start by apologising for the slight lateness of these starting of the meeting. We've got a lot of items on the agenda and a lot of properties we did have to inspect this morning. We ran a little late through that process, so apologies to those who've been waiting online for a while. Before we begin the meeting, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodian of the land and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Only applications with 10 or more unique submissions are now required to be considered in public meetings of the panel where people can make oral submissions. Other matters will be considered by the panel electronically and without any oral submissions. Applicants and objectors have been advised by notification letters whether the matter is being considered in the private meeting or the electronic meeting and the process to be followed. Procedures of the panel. The panel has undertaken inspections of the items, as I've said, on both the public and electronic meeting agendas. We've been provided with an assessment report prepared by council staff. We've also briefed the panel on each application. There are a number of people registered to address the panel at the public meeting via video conference. The order of speakers for each item will be firstly objectors, followed by those supporting the application, including the applicants or their representatives. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes to address the panel. The time sign will be shown by council staff at the end of your 3 minutes. Whilst I do have discretion to extend that period of time, because we do have a lot of speakers today, I will be more rigidly enforcing that. Those of you who are given 3 minute presentations before know, it goes very quickly. So I suggest that you try to get your points across as early as possible in your presentation. And also, if you are one of a number of presenters, I request that if the matter you're wishing to raise has been raised by a prior objector, if you could not repeat that point. The panel was provided with copies of all submissions received in response to the post expedition of the application and forwarded a copy of late correspondence. Therefore, again, there is no need for the speakers to repeat points made in your written submission or reiterate points of previous speakers. The panel members may ask questions of the speakers to clarify our understanding of what is being said. We expect that each speaker will be heard in silence while they're addressing the panel, and that courtesy and respect be observed throughout this meeting. Panel members and Woollahra Council do not accept any liability for statements, comments or actions taken by individuals during a panel meeting. You should be aware that the public meeting live stream and recorded. The audio recordings will be uploaded on the council website. I ask that you please mute your microphone, noting that we have the ability to mute for attendees and for individuals. After hearing from speakers on all items, the public meeting will be closed and the panel will then deliberate and make our decision for matters on both the public and the electronic agendas. The minutes of the panel's decision, including our reasons, will be available on the panel's website as soon as possible after the meeting. Before the meeting, against all members of the panel filled out declaration of interest forms, which are held with council. I'll just now go around to the panelists and ask them to let the record if they have interest declared. Peter?
I have no conflicts, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Lee?
I have a perceived conflict for electronic agenda item D4.
Okay.
I've given a list of objectors with whom I'm acquainted to staff, and I think that will be reprinted. In each case, they're non-significant, non-cumulating. Since I've got all the agenda papers, I I am acquainted with Michael Suttle, who was described as an associate architect for the Wolseley Road item D2. But again, it's non-significant, non-human.
Thank you. Okay, now we will hear from speakers and we all will read them out. In relation to item one, item one is a planning proposal for the Edgefield Commercial Centre, and the benefit of those online. This is a matter where the panel does not make a decision. The panel's role in relation to planning proposals is to provide advice to the elected councils. So our recommendation will form part of a report that will go to council or the council meeting for the council to make their decision on the item. So that said, the first speaker I've registered is Esther Hayden from the Paddington Society. Esther, if you would like to commence, and please.
Hello.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yes, I'm sorry. I actually did register to speak for this, and I sent in very extensively correspondence that I hope the committee has received.
We have, but please, if I'd ask you not to interrupt the. I've made a call for someone to address the panel. If you could just.
She's on the list. She's the last speaker.
Yes, so you are on the list.
Thank you. I'm not normally I go first. That's why I was confused. Apologies.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Hayter, please.
Yes, hello. Look, I'm Esther Hayter. I live in Royalston Street, Paddington, down the hill, and an architect and a president of the Paddington Society. We made a lengthy submission regarding the original ECC strategy, plus several subsequent submissions, including suggestions expressing great concern about the potential loss of existing affordable housing and major deficiencies in the traffic and infrastructure proposals, as well as environmental ones. But we confirmed general support for the strategy endorsed by Council in April, although not for the unchanged deficiencies. Our late correspondence has outlined some of the benefits of the final strategy, and time limits me here, but we know that all the communities surrounding the ECC and those further afield are dismayed that the DPHI has removed the unsolicited proposal for Site H, the Edgecliff Centre, and other large budget proposals in this precinct and elsewhere from council control, and that the Sydney Eastern City Planning Panel recommendation for a 9-to-1 FSR across the whole of Site H, including the 1,000 square metres of council land, could enable the proposal for bulky towers equivalent to 37 and 15 stories to proceed, subject to variations. Traffic infrastructure and environmental deficiencies and the huge negative impacts affecting all surrounding areas and the whole LGA remain unaddressed. And to add to this, the unsolicited proposal for 8 to 10 New Maclean Street, previously not at all included in the ECC strategy, raises the same concerns, including that demolition of 3 low-rise buildings which for decades have provided 104 genuinely affordable apartments could be replaced by an 18-storey tower with either 285 or 325 apartments. Consider the bulk of a tower housing that number, yet to be decided. And the 136-148 New South Head Road site, previously approved, now proposes a 30% increase in uplift, adding to the problems for this precinct. The minimal impost of 3, 5 or even 15% of affordable housing for 15 years or a monetary contribution, very important, does not seem to guarantee that any affordable housing will be provided in this precinct. All will be subject to future uncertain VPAs. Analysis of the traffic, supporting infrastructure and negative environmental impacts, including on Trumper Park, seem to be unrealistic in all 3 massive proposals. Traffic flow-on impacts and parking pressures into surrounding heritage precincts are the most egregious if the cumulative impacts is contemplated.
Your 3 minutes is up.
I just want to say then I'll conclude by asking any of those who ask for delay in amending the controls for the ECC, I'll join them. It seems highly unadvisable until such time as the associated impacts have been properly analysed, and it does not seem to be in the public interest to proceed in such haste before Christmas at this time. Thank you very much.
And I've just been informed, this isn't here, but I did rob you of a little bit of time. I heard the 2-minute bell was a 30-minute.
Sorry. Well, look, I think others will say what I would have probably followed on by saying thank you.
Any questions?
No.
Second speaker on this item, Tony Bond. Mr. Bond, could you announce yourself, please?
Mr. Bond, are you there?
Let's see.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, good. Tony Bond. I'm representing the Edgecliff residents group, and I would have to say that Esther Hayter has just covered a lot of the ground that we're concerned about. In fact, those heads of issues are the things that need, in our view, need to be addressed by a continued planning process which coordinates the proposed developments both in the Edgecliff Centre, 8 to 10 New Maclean Street, and over across the road in Darling Point. The neighbourhood concern, I should just say, none of us are NIMBYs. We've had many discussions about this, and we support development that's proportionate and in the best interests of the wider community. But we don't support development that enable developers to make stratospheric profits by building stratospheric towers. I note that the Liberal Vaucluse, the MP Kelly Sloan, has called on the Minns government to get this right. That's this particular development, saying that while she supported a significant uplift, the proposal offers less affordable housing, fewer community facilities, and a design which is imposing. Now, I have a particular view on the ground level view on the traffic situation, and that's a major concern to Edgecliff residents. It seems that has been completely neglected by all the plans and the documentation that have been put forward so far. And perhaps that's because it's insoluble. I own a car park in the grounds of 8 to 10 New Maclean Street. And like every other resident of Edgecliff, I can attest that for many hours a day, one goes out to New Maclean Street, which you will see in your mind's eye, I'm sure, and there is a double line of cars ticking over, belching petrol fumes and inching across New South Head Road 5 seconds by 5 seconds. It can take 20-30 minutes to get out of there. It's an efficiency and environmental catastrophe. Now, consider what will happen when this is tripled or quadrupled. That it's proposed by Landmark this is in 8 to 10 New Maclean Street, to have 400 new car parking spaces, 300 more units, and together with the extra bulk, the enormous extra bulk in the Edgecliff Centre, it will just be complete paralysis, and this will affect the whole of the eastern suburbs. The navigation point at New South Head Road, Darling Point Road, and New Maclean Street will be completely choked, and it's just astonishing. What we're calling on the council to do is review the situation, do more plans and tests for the congestion of traffic problem, and also look at the community benefit. The idea of having a small proportion of affordable housing for a limited amount of time rather than in perpetuity, I think is absolutely tragic when we have, at the moment, in this exact area, we have 104 small units which could fairly be described as affordable housing. When put together, if the plans are coordinated, you will find a diminution in affordable housing, and that together with the problems with traffic will be, I think, have an enormously deleterious effect, not just on Edgecliff and the surrounding environments, but on the whole of the eastern suburbs.
Presentation, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There is a lot more to say, but time forbids.
Could I just remind all speakers, we do have a lot of speakers, and you'll hear hopefully the two-minute warning bell. I do need to enforce the 3 minutes because, as I say, we need to get through a lot of items. But thank you for respecting. Next speaker is William Norton. Mr. Norton, can you announce yourself, please?
Yeah, I'm online here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Yeah, I firstly would just like to open by saying I also, as a local resident, I've been a resident and an owner in the area, just in Glebe Street, just behind the Edgecliff Centre now for 12 years with my family, 2 children and a wife. And you know, my views, I think, are also representative of the broader community around the Edgecliff area. We're not opposed to redevelopment of the Edgecliff Centre in a sympathetic manner with appropriate height and scale, not at all. The current developer's proposal, endorsed by the East Sydney Local Planning Panel of 37 residential levels, plus adjacent commercial towers of 13 and 15 stories, on its own does not reflect such sympathy for the natural and residential environment, including surrounding residential properties. When, however, combine that proposed development with 2 additional unsolicited proposals for 18 stories at 8 to 10 New Maclean Street and 17 stories at 1 Darling Point, if all 3 developments were permitted to proceed, it would have a catastrophic and irreversible impact on the surrounding areas, including 1, gross overshadowing, loss of sunlight and views to surrounding residential properties and public spaces, including Trumper Park, and a negative impact on the flora and fauna of Trumper Park as well. 2, gross exacerbation of already extreme traffic and public transport congestion, significantly impacting not only surrounding residents, but anyone travelling along New South Head Road, Darling Point Road, or Ocean Street at both peak and off-peak times. A lot more work needs to be done by council and government to research those issues. Whether it's feasible to build a tunnel under New South Head Road, that's something that should be properly investigated. 3, net loss of affordable housing, in particular some 81 bedroom and studio apartments at 8 to 10 New Maclean Street, to be replaced by hundreds of multi-million-dollar 2 to 3 bedroom apartments with harbour and city views. There are no guarantees of any affordable housing in the proposed developments, with either a 5% cash payment or 15% affordable housing for only 15 years with ownership retained by developers. Totally inappropriate. 4, exacerbation of already congested residential parking in neighbouring streets. 5, strain on infrastructure and utility services, which was noted in the original ECC strategy by council, but has not been resolved, particularly in the context of the 3 large-scale ad hoc development proposals. And 6, excessive disruption of local residents and the broader community during the construction phase, including traffic congestion, noise, pollution, vibrations, and likely damage caused by excavation of 8 levels of car parking, noting that the 1 level of excavation in the Woolworths car park in Double Bay caused damage to surrounding houses. What is clearly required is a coordinated plan by council and state government to address all these concerns in a coordinated, well-considered and measured manner, rather than caving into the immediate pressure imposed by opportunistic developers. The community, quite rightly, does not want another Bondi Junction in Edgecliff, which compromises the interests of everyone except developers and wealthy property investors. Finally, it would appear that other municipal councils have taken a proactive approach in challenging efforts by the state government to capsize the local government democratic process. For example, North Sydney Council, who are currently challenging in the Independent Planning Commission the 30% uplift to height and FSR allowed by the state government's 15% affordable housing for 15 years loophole in relation to a 22-storey proposed.
Thank you very much. So we do have to enforce these targets, please. The next speaker is Councillor Merrill Witt. Councillor Witt, have the 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you very much. I did send in some late correspondence that I hope you all received, only because some of my concerns about the planning proposal were quite detailed. I won't repeat what the other speakers have said in terms of, I think, the need for the planning proposal to at least provide for context these other three unsolicited planning proposals, which together will meet the additional, the additional dwelling number, 490 to 615 dwellings for the whole of the ECC. I'd just like to briefly sort of draw your attention to the infrastructure. What I've seen is a real dearth in detail in terms of the infrastructure requirements to support such a significant development. If you look at page 11 of my late correspondence, I refer to an earlier unsolicited, a staff report for an earlier unsolicited planning proposal for the Edgecliff Centre, and they outlined, and at that point, a range of community facilities that were needed. Things like libraries, cultural multi-use community centres, childcare, education, outside school hours care, early childhood health services, services for seniors, and universal access, recreation, and open space. I do believe that if we're going to support such an increase in density in Edgecliff, we really need a very good schedule of the types of infrastructure that are required to support it. And I also note that the proponent of the Edgecliff Centre unsolicited planning proposal actually asked the Sydney Eastern Planning Panel to look at it as Edgecliff as a strategic centre, not a local centre. So I do think there could be opportunity there for us to even, solicit more support from the state government in terms of upgrading the infrastructure facilities there. And I also, sorry, I know I'm running out of time, but I just wanted to also focus, because it was really a requirement of the council resolution approving the strategy to look at how we could fund the infrastructure uplift. And I thought we would see an analysis in the planning proposal of why a 7-11 contribution scheme wasn't being considered. Because I think that would require a decent schedule of the infrastructure required. And then also the affordable housing contribution scheme. I just think this idea of 3% going to 5% makes no sense to me. I think we should be a lot stronger on ambition. I just realized that, if the controls are uplifted, we'll get a slew of development applications in the next 3 years, because developers won't want the impost of a higher affordable contribution scheme. And also, just to alert you that the CGS analysis that was commissioned actually didn't even think that the impost of an affordable housing contribution scheme would necessarily stop developers wanting to utilise the provision in the housing SEP for a 30% uplift in height and FSR in exchange for 15% affordable housing. And I'm still not sure how we can actually present that clause, because it is a SEP, and typically SEP do override LEPs and DCPs. So yeah, anyway, I won't leave it there, but I do appreciate you taking the time to read my late correspondence and also taking into consideration the comments made by the previous speakers. We're not against development. We just really want to get it right. Thank you.
Next speaker on this item is Barney Sterling. Ben.
Are you there, Danny?
Can you hear me?
We can.
Great. Thank you for allowing me to speak briefly. I think that the previous speakers have covered most of the points that I wanted to make, but let me just run through what I felt is the issue here. And that is this purely for the benefit of developers? What about residents and ratepayers in terms of this plan? We know the latter will lose out because of some stark facts: the overburdening of a major road artery, overwhelming the local infrastructure, overshadowing Trumper Park, overcrowding a tiny street, New Maclean Street, overturning an area that is currently a rare in a city oasis, and all this while overlooking the fact that the result will not be an increase, but a reduction in affordable housing. So my question really to the panel is, how can we, or more importantly, you or any other authority, let this happen? By what reasoning? If the Edgecliff development proposals don't benefit the community, the question is, why are they being considered? So I do think that covers most of the points the previous speakers have raised. And thank you for your time. I think I'm one of many residents here who fear the loss of this area thanks to these proposals should they proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. So that concludes the registered speakers for item D1. Thank you for that presentation. I'll move to item D2, which is DA 84 2024-1, with number 30 Wolseley Road, Point Woollahra. I have 20 who were registered to present as objectors to that paper. The first, and then we have some objectors to the applicant to speak after that. The first speaker I have is listed is Douglas Bennett. Mr. Bennett, could you announce yourself and first give me the balance of the time for this 3 minutes for your presentation. Appreciate it. Stick to that.
Sure. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, panel members. My name is Douglas Bennett, and I'm acting on behalf of an objector at number 2B Wentworth Street, Point Piper, in relation to this matter. In a written submission dated 17th of November 2024 that I prepared on behalf of neighbouring residents, I outlined that the provision of a single motorcycle parking space within the proposed basement exceeded the minimum parking requirements for motorcycles under the DCP, which requires 1 space for every 10 car parking spaces. The effect of this is that the motorcycle parking space is required to be included as gross floor area, resulting in the proposal's non-compliance with the floor space ratio development standard. This matter is largely unresolved. Council's assessment report claims that the minimum parking requirement for motorcycles in this development is 0.5 spaces, and as the DCP requires parking space requirements to be rounded up to the nearest whole number, this means that the minimum requirement for this development is 1 motorcycle parking space. However, this interpretation is flawed and would have the effect of requiring a single motorcycle parking space for every development that provides at least 5 parking spaces, effectively doubling the ratio implied in the control. This would unfairly burden small developments by effectively requiring twice the intended ratio, which is not in accordance with the intent of the control. The approval of the application in its current form without an appropriately prepared Clause 4.6 variation request to vary the floor space ratio development standard leaves the determination open to judicial review and exposes the consent authority to unnecessary risk. In addition to this matter, it's noted that the assessment report that council's traffic engineer has recommended conditions to minimise traffic disruption on Wolseley Road should vehicle queuing extend beyond the property boundary due to the operation of the proposed car lift. However, no such condition has been included in the recommended condition set. The potential traffic and parking impacts associated with proposed vehicle queuing on Wolseley Road remains unresolved in this regard. Finally, I would like to mention that the loss of solar access to internal habitable areas of number 26 to 28 Wolseley Road has not been adequately addressed by the proponent, and the proposal remains inconsistent with the planning principle established under the Benevolent Society and Waverley Council. With these additional matters in mind, I'd like to request that the panel, in exercising its delegated authority, determine the application by way of refusal. Alternatively, the application should be deferred until such time as the matters raised today have been adequately resolved. Thank you for your time and consideration.
A question, President?
Thank you. Chair, through you, I've got a question of start in relation to the case made by Mr. Bennett at pages 75 to 79 about the gross floor area calculation. motorcycle parking area. Have we received any advice on that? Because it is a matter which, if Mr. Bennett's right, would go to the validity of any consent, could possibly lead to class 4 proceedings. So have we received any legal advice?
Through the chair, we haven't received legal advice. The report has touched upon that issue, and that is a matter that I will advise the panel in relation to the calculation of gross floor area and the FSR issue.
Anything further?
No, sorry, Mr.
Thank you, Chair. Next speaker I have registered is Robert Chambers. Chambers, could you announce yourself if you're there, please?
Good afternoon, panel members. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. Bob Chambers here from BBC Consulting Planners. I'm here on behalf of the owner of 26 to 28 Wolseley Road, which is a fine interwar Georgian revival style house built about 100 years ago, which has had much the same view of Sydney Harbour throughout all that time as it has now. It was designed by Wilson, Neve and Berry Architects, the architecture firm established by William Hardy Wilson. My client's home is heritage listed, and in its siting, configuration and orientation is designed to see and be seen from the harbour. I prepared a late submission in which I seek to bring to your attention several fundamental deficiencies with the proposal. Essentially, what these deficiencies relate to is inadequate consideration of the proposal's proximity and relationship to and impacts on my client's heritage listed house. And I ask the panel members, when considering these deficiencies, to bear in mind that the development site's nearly 50 metres below the minimum lot size for a residential flat building, and thus relies on a clause 4.6 variation request, which the panel is being asked to uphold and which the panel is being asked to conclude is well founded. So there are, I think, 6 matters I want to quickly bring to your attention. Firstly, prior to the AAP meeting on the 5th of November, the issue of the impact on views of my client's heritage listed home from the harbour had not been considered by either the applicant or by council. Suffice to say, photos provided to the AAP showed that there's an issue. The photos are in attachment 1 of my late submission. Can I just, you do have my late submission?
We have.
Thank you. Thank you. Secondly, the AAP required the applicant to assess views from selected viewpoints on the harbour and to consider the associated heritage impacts. The additional information submitted by the applicant on the 21st of November purports to address the AAP's request. However, the information is inaccurate and insufficient. The inaccuracy lies in the photo montages, which are out by some considerable margin of around 25%. And I refer the panel in that regard to the correspondence from John Aspinall in attachment 2 of my late submission. The insufficiency lies in the heritage assessment arising from the proposal being done by the applicant's planner, not by a recognised qualified heritage consultant. There's been no heritage impact statement prepared by the applicant for this proposal, notwithstanding that the development site adjoins a heritage item that's listed in Schedule 5 of Council's LEP. My client, however, has retained the expert heritage team at Urbis to assess the heritage impact of the proposal, and their letter is in attachment 3 of my late submission. And you'll see they say it has an adverse impact. Thirdly, I might add here that the existing building on the development site is one of a small number of immediately adjacent buildings adjacent to Wolseley Road that have pitch roofs. These include 2 heritage listed items. That's my client's home in Denmark at 16 to 18 Wolseley Road. These pitch roofs are readily distinguishable from the harbour, and had a heritage impact statement been prepared, it could well have concluded, and likely to have concluded, that a pitch roof form was the most appropriate roof form for a new building on the development site. Such a roof form would have a reduced impact.
Mr. James, your time is up.
Can I just add 3 quick points? Very quick. The impact, the views from the sun in my attachment.
Thank you. Once again, I just repeat for everyone's benefit, it's within the 3-minute time frame, you'll get a 2-minute notification. And I would ask you to respect that. We have received all submissions. and have gone through those. So you don't need to feel the need to repeat points that have been made in your written submission. Thank you. The next note I have is Madam Jovovich. I'm very sorry, I've destroyed your name there, but please do that.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, can.
Thank you very much. My name is Mladen Punjatovic. I'm a director of MBC, acting for the owners of 26 to 28 Wolseley Road. That's property immediately to the south. We're a firm of architects, we prepared 2 alternative designs, which you will find in Appendix 5 of the late submission by Mr. Chambers. We did this because our pre-DA offer to work with the applicant's architects to resolve some of the issues went ignored. I want to focus on the heritage impacts. This DA before you has been in effect refused by Council's own AAP, who instead requested more information. This additional information provided by the applicant, as Mr. Chambers pointed out, that's before you now is both inadequate because it has no heritage consultant advising on it, and it's inaccurate as demonstrated by Urbain's analysis in Appendix 2. The problem is that this flawed information is what Council's own heritage officer had to base their assessment on. On page 183 of Council's report, the Council officer says that admits that there is a reduction in the visibility of the heritage item from the public space, basically acknowledging the substantial negative impact and even listing the building elements that will be no longer visible. Only to conclude that this impact is acceptable because the proposed dwelling height, as shown on the montages, sits well below that of the heritage item. The truth is, it doesn't. The critical relationship is that between the top of the applicant's building and the gutter or the base of the roof of our client's heritage house. The applicant is showing the top of the building lower than the base of the heritage roof, whereas it's in fact higher, substantially higher. This is no criticism of the Heritage Office's assessment, but their conclusions are drawn from a fatally flawed photo montages by the applicant, which are up to 25% inaccurate. And that brings me to the alternative plans that we prepared. Design solution 1 is limited to incorporating of the existing side setback between the 2 buildings. This option delivers the same brief and program for the applicant as their current proposal. They don't lose a single room and the floor plate is reduced by about 5% on each floor. Urbis Heritage Review Impact Assessment states that while better, this would still result in moderate visual impact to the significance of the heritage item, mainly because the proposal would still be unsympathetic to the style and character of the precinct for its flat roof. This is why we did design solution 2, which involves the same setbacks plus the pitched roof. Urbis says that that solution 2 would now result in only a minor visual impact. The pitch roof is characteristic to the precinct, would maintain the visual prominence of the heritage item, including the visibility of its roof line and overall form. In conclusion, the 2 options we prepared demonstrate there are better alternative designs, more heritage appropriate, less impactful. We trust the panel will give these 2 proper consideration and direct the applicant to amend their design accordingly or refuse the application altogether. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Okay, now that's all the objections I have registered. I have 3 people registered on the applicant, George Caravanos, James Phillips, and Michael Sudu. Whoever is proposing to lead off, Mr. Caravanos, so see your hand up. So you wish to present, and if you do, if you could please respond to some of the issues raised by the objectors. And I'll just explain to others in the meeting that in asking the applicant to respond to issues raised, I will give a little bit more discretion in terms of the 3 minutes so that your issues are adequately dealt with. So it's not free range for the applicants, but it is an opportunity for them to address things that they've heard raised. So just if you think I'm going easier on the applicant, I'm not. It's hopefully for the benefit of understanding of the item. Mr. Caravanos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to confirm that the other 2 speakers will not be speaking. They'll just be answering any questions of the panel following my presentation. So again, if I can indulge you for a little bit more time, that would be great. I am speaking on behalf of the applicant in support of the application. My name is George Karavanis. I'm a Managing Director of GSA Planning. First, I'd like to confirm that we concur with the assessment of the Council Officer's report, and we do not wish to challenge any of the conditions. Secondly, as you would be aware, the application was deferred by the previous AAP meeting to provide the applicant with the opportunity to address any view impact from the harbour on the local heritage item next door. In this regard, photo montages and the view assessment have been provided. The Council's Heritage Officer has considered the proposal, and that's all that needs to be done. An assessment needs to be made by the Council. That has been done, and it's been done by the Council's Heritage Officer, who's the expert on this, and has concluded that the proposal retains the visual prominence of the heritage item and is therefore appropriate. In other words, the heritage item can be seen and also see towards the harbour. On this basis, the proposal, in my opinion, achieves the intent of the previous panel resolution, and my opinion is shared by council officers who have prepared a further assessment report, which indeed recommends approval of the application. Members of the panel, you'll also be aware the proposal is permissible in the R3 zone and well within the FSR standard of the LEP. While there's a minor variation with the height limit, this does not result in any impacts and is supported by clause 4.6. In terms of the lot size breach, again, this is also minor. Very importantly, however, it does not have any amalgamation opportunities, because on the one side we've got a residential building, on the other side we've got a heritage item. In such circumstances, the council's position on numerous applications approved by both council and the court has been that they will allow the variation on the basis of contextual compatibility, and as such, this has been achieved. I'm happy to respond further to this in question time. With the minor exception of some small variations, the proposal complies with the DCP. The minor non-compliances do not give rise to any impacts, and that's again confirmed by the council staff. More importantly, the proposal provides a greater rear setback than a fully compliant envelope. Now, that's a better deal for the neighbour, because what it does, it gives them an aperture of 2 additional metres towards the view that would not normally be provided by a complying development. In respect of further objections, the proposal has a shutter that's appropriate on merit, and this is confirmed in the council officer's report. Privacy has also been addressed by a series of conditions as well as any number of measures. In terms of view sharing, this has been dealt with in detail in the council officer's report, and has been considered as minor. While one view impact is considered moderate, this is limited to one viewpoint only and is acceptable as the elements causing the view impact are compliant and, in fact, as I indicated previously, over compliant. Importantly, this building has uninterrupted views to the west, and only a minor view impact is via side boundary, and we all know what tenacity says about side boundaries, particularly by a more than a compliant building. So for those reasons, the view impact is considered to be appropriate. In respect of the first matter that's raised by the first speaker, and that of motorbike parking, our opinion is that the proposal complies. Now, if the panel or the council staff deem it not to comply and it's an over-compliance, then we're happy to convert that that motorbike space into storage. If it's converted into storage, then it doesn't count as floor space, and there's no clause 4.6 relevant. So that relieves the application of any jurisdictional impacts. In respect of the matters raised by other objectors, the view analysis has been done as accurately as possible. It's not 100% accurate, and that can be explained by Michael's study, given the circumstance of the case. However, the impact is immaterial because the impact is resulting from a side boundary, an over-compliant building that sits well behind what is required by the council controls and complies with the height and other standards, more importantly, the FSR. I think that's all I need to raise at this stage. I'm happy to answer any questions of the panel, and so are my colleagues, Michael Suddy, and I think our heritage expert is here as well. Thank you, members of the panel.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Any questions?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Mr. Carradine, in preparing the application, you didn't do necessary that you should have a heritage architect act on your behalf or your client's behalf to provide an impact statement in relation to the heritage item adjoining?
We did. There was a heritage report prepared by Wee Phillips. That was done on the demolition of the report. We then prepared an assessment on the planning merits of the application in respect of the relevant clause of the LEP. I personally have 32 years of experience in heritage and planning matters, and also team members within my team are architects as well as planners. So we're well qualified to provide that advice. More importantly, as I indicated, the test is for the council, for them to make that assessment, right? And they have made that assessment clearly in the heritage referral and found that to be satisfactory.
But where Phillips didn't make any comment, they only addressed, as I understand it, the merit of demolition of the existing building. So, that's correct?
Correct, that's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thanks very much. So that is all the registered speakers I had for that item. So move to item 3 is DA 747 2023/1. Number 816 Queen Street, Woollahra. I have 5 speakers in objection to the item. Representative of the applicant. First director is Charles Mendel. Mr. Mendel, if you're aware, could you announce the job and you have the speaking?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Sorry about that. I'm not very good at Zoom. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very brief, obviously, because I'm aware there are a number of speakers, as you just said. I'm speaking on behalf of the Woollahra Residents Association, and I guess the points we'd like to make are that having read the very comprehensive report to the panel, there are just 3 areas I think that we'd like to discuss briefly or raise briefly. The first is the existing use question. My understanding and our understanding is that this matter is not subject to an appeal at the moment. It rests at the moment wholly within the process that we're engaging in now. We think that while we acknowledge the analysis about existing use in the report provided to the panel, we think there are some issues still with existing use. It's not quite so cut and dry. On page 409, from memory, I think, of the report, the second paragraph refers to the guest house use as being sufficient to ground the hotel use. We think that actually is not that simple, and that there is a potential jurisdictional issue. I don't know whether that's why the matter isn't an appeal yet or not. That's a matter for the applicant, obviously, but we do think that there is a problem with existing use. To turn to some of the more practical aspects, look, it's obviously we understand the applicant's desire and the owner's desire, and I notice Mr. Blank is present, to maximise the value of the site. It's a terrific community site, and it could be fantastic. And the idea of doing something to improve it is something I think that should be praised and supported. The issue, I think, comes in 2 major issues. The first is the 50% or so breach of the LEP height control, which is 9.5 metres at a proposed height of 14.5 metres. That obviously creates great impact. The second is in relation to the impact on neighbours. I know that Mr. Loxton, Dickon Loxton, is speaking today, and he is directly impacted, and there are a number of neighbours who are. And the third issue, of course, is in terms of logistics, principally garbage handling, operations and traffic management. Those things are issues which, to our mind, given that this is a balance and given that it is praiseworthy that there be some investment and development in this site, and obviously what's proposed is a quality type of development, we wonder whether it would be appropriate, given that this is not in the appeal process, for the owner perhaps to engage with the community on those key issues I've just raised. I'm not suggesting the existing use rights is one of them. That's a legal issue. I'm talking about the height the amenity issues in terms of privacy and whether or not, in respect of logistics and handling, materials handling, there might be something put in place that can assist. The only other thing I'd say briefly in conclusion is that we note that the heritage conclusion is that it's sufficient to retain the Victorian villa. We note the lack of concern or support for the demolition of the existing 1924 buildings. And I guess we just accept that that's an appropriate conclusion in view of the fact that they're only contributory items. Thank you for indulging me. I'm sorry to have taken more time than I should have.
No, thanks, Mr. for that. Next speaker registered is Giles Edmund. Edmund, if you could announce yourself and make it part of your speech.
I'll just you need to unmute Mr. Edmonds.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. My name is Giles Edmonds. I'm the president of the Queen Street and West Woollahra Association. We're a community resident and business association founded over 50 years ago. Associations focused on preserving and maintaining the unique village atmosphere of Woollahra, enhancing a strong community spirit for its residents, and supporting local businesses create an attractive, vibrant commercial environment. We have around 300 members, but there are many other non-members who contact us and also participate in our events. Reading the list of submissions, I recognised about 30 names as members, and there's probably more whose names I didn't immediately recognise. This DA is the one which has generated the most correspondence from our members, almost all objecting to it and sharing our two major concerns regarding, firstly, the inappropriate bulk and scale, and secondly, the adverse impact on increased demand for on-street parking. So let me say a little bit more about both of those. Firstly, the inappropriate bulk and scale. Under the local zoning, the maximum height allowed is 9.5, as I'm sure you're aware. The DA proposes 4 stories plus the equipment installed on the roof, which takes the total height to around 14.6 metres, which is a 54% increase above the maximum allowed. Now, Queen Street is a key part of the Woollahra Heritage Conservation Area, and the scale of this building with construction over the entire site, together with this proposed height, will completely dwarf the remaining heritage facade and is totally out of character with its surroundings. It also, as mentioned earlier, is going to adversely impact neighbouring properties. In addition, any relaxation on the building heights would set a terrible precedent for the conservation area, and we would certainly urge the panel to reject the plans on the grounds of inappropriate bulk and scale alone. Now I'll turn to the second objection, the lack of on-site parking. I have to say this proposal for no on-site parking can only be treated as ridiculous. It not only removes the existing parking spots, but results in further loss of parking spaces to accommodate the curbside pickup and drop-off. But at the same time, it increases the demand for parking as it increases the number of rooms to 43, and as and is also planning to increase the use of the premises for functions and dining. Now, you only got to compare the minimum required under the DCP, which was 47, with the 0 proposed in the DA, just to see how ludicrous this assumption is. Now, I have to say, we've just held our local Christmas window display competition for local businesses, and we had over 50 businesses enter. So I spent a fair amount of time over the last month or so talking to business owners. And I can say their biggest complaint by far is the lack of parking. This dwarfs anything else they worry about, and they write to me, and I say, oh, well, I can't do anything about it. But this is an example where we can do something about it, or at least try to prevent it getting worse. The proposal would mean staff and probably the majority of guests will continue to need to find additional parking, either short-term on Queen Street or in the surrounding streets where there are some 24-hour parking spots. But parking is bad enough in our streets at the moment. You may have found that on your site visit this morning, and this will only compound it. Again, this is another massive reason to refuse the application. But Heaton needs renovating.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. It appears that when I'm speaking while someone else is speaking, I don't think my completely asking people to conclude to be heard. So I apologise for the fact that we have been giving people, we've been run over time, but we certainly understand the points that you raised. So thank you very much for that. The next speaker I have is Michael Baker. If you could announce yourself and identify who you're speaking on behalf of.
Yes, I'm here. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, panel members, for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Michael Baker. I'm a consultant town planner for SJB Planning, and we're representing the owners of number 21 Jersey Road, located to the rear or north of the site, and also residents of 18 Queen Street, which is located on the eastern boundary of the site. These two properties are freestanding dwellings within landscape grounds. We've reviewed the council's assessment report. We acknowledge the DA's recommended refusal, and we thank council officers for this recommendation. We have put two submissions in during the course of the assessment of the DA, and we've raised a number of issues, which I'm not going to go through all of them today. A number of them have already been discussed by the previous two speakers, being the traffic and parking implications, the failure to adequately demonstrate that the site benefits from existing use rights, and the scale of the development. The concerns that I want to focus on is being the two immediately adjacent properties are, one, the amenity concerns, the privacy impacts of having 12 hotel rooms and balconies facing immediately out onto my client's property at 18 Queen Street. I'd also like to focus on the fact that the existing 9-metre high wall on the nil setback is proposed to be demolished, and contrary to the photo or principle of existing use rights, which is spelt out on page 411 of the report, where there is an existing building proposed for demolition, there is no automatic entitlement to another building of the same size being built again. The proposal not only proposes to rebuild that wall on a nil setback to my client's boundary, but increase its height, varying between 1.5 and 3.7 metres taller, drastically increasing the bulk and scale onto the rear of their property. Our concerns lie that this proposal relies on the scale and location of the existing building, which is proposed to be demolished. It's a building that's clearly out of scale and character with the surrounding development, and the objectives and controls of the R2 low-density residential zoning of the land. Ideally, this development should be providing a landscape setback to the rear boundary and consistent with the character of the surrounding detached dwellings. There should be no increase in the height of what is this existing 9-metre high wall on the nil setback. Council planners have disagreed and concluded that from a visual bulk perspective, there will be minimal difference. We clearly disagree with this point, and we suggest that this bulk and scale impact should also be included as a reason for refusal. Furthermore, the proposal includes a 4-metre excavation along the rear boundary of our client's property without the benefit of geotechnical investigation along this boundary due to the location of the existing building. This is within 1 metre of our client's.
Thank you. The next speaker I have is Dr. Duncan Lockton. If you announce yourself, please.
You're on mute.
Dickon Loxton from a very messy study in 17 Jersey Road, our house, which adjoins the site. I was very pleased and grateful for the panel to visit us this morning together with number 19, because until that meeting, no one associated with the proposal at all, either from the council side or the applicant side, had come out to see the ways in which we're affected. And of course, that means they've missed some things. And I'll talk about them in a second, but first I just want to address a few things that I think are relevant to the community that I treasure, and that, as Giles Edmonds has correctly referred to, is a village. It's great to see council recommending rejection, but there are some things on which they seem inclined to give a tick where I'd give a very big cross. And this may be because their decision is based on a number of significant factual inaccuracies, which I pointed out in late correspondence on Monday. First, as to scale, agree with everything that's been said. Something that occupies 7 standard lots and is 4 stories high is clearly inappropriate. The diagram on page 414 of the materials in image 4 is said to show the minimum impact. In fact, that statement has things entirely the wrong way around. There are effectively 2 extra stories on the property. And the materials say that most houses around the vicinity are 2 or 3 story terraces. The vast majority are traditional Victorian 2-story terraces. And their peaked roofs reach about 9.5 metres, so the existing height limit is entirely appropriate and reasonable, including for a hotel. Secondly, everybody focuses on the heritage value of the 1870s Victorian gentleman's villa being preserved. In fact, the villa is not being preserved. Only the front section is being preserved. The rear section is being demolished. And the value of a Victorian gentleman's villa is that it's detached and surrounded by gardens. This won't be surrounded by gardens. It will be surrounded by new modern development. And the heavy round Mediterranean arches with beige brown bricks are said to, in some way, to echo the square painted form of the terraces in the vicinity. They don't, they clash with them. And a western 3rd floor setback, which I think has been suggested by some of the council staff, won't cure those issues. Parking and traffic, I echo everything that's been said, just to point out that there are effectively 3 separate businesses, each able to operate separately on the premises, vastly more than is currently there. A hotel capable of holding 96 people, a restaurant capable of holding 96 people, a function room capable of holding a lot more, and a gym brand new to the site, again holding 96 customers. And to say they don't need parking is just ridiculous.
The next speaker I have is Councillor Sarah Swan, who I believe is in the room, and the same rules apply in terms of the so hopefully you'll be able to hear me.
Yes, I certainly will, and thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I know it was a late registration, and I'm very grateful for the indulgence. I won't repeat the concerns that have been raised because I know how frustrating that can be, having chaired many council meetings myself. I just want to emphasise that while I was out door knocking during the local government election campaign, this hotel, because it has come up previously, was raised as a significant issue, and the issues raised previously are still in issue. Those issues have been addressed today, so I won't go into the specifics, but just to emphasise that these are things that have been raised recently while door knocking and then subsequently through many telephone conversations in particular, and when I'm out and about, particularly on Queen Street. So this development is of significant concern to the community. I want to speak a little more on one thing that Mr. Edmonds spoke to, and that's the impact on local businesses. On the one hand, the hotel can be viewed as a business, a local business as well. However, when you consider how many businesses on Queen Street there are and how they will be impacted, I think the panel, and I encourage the panel, will take a utilitarian approach to the way they consider the impact on business and the widespread impact this will have to the other local businesses. Now, that's not to say that this business does not deserve to have its renovations done. However, they should be done in a way which complies with our controls and which respects the heritage conservation in which it occupies. And so for that reason, I would ask that the panel refuse the application because it does not comply on the one hand, and also because of the impact, the disproportionate impact on local businesses. One other aspect I would like to raise, that if the panel were to put over mind to accept this, I'm not familiar reading the papers, doesn't appear that they will, but I am concerned about the excavation impacts, and that was touched on briefly, but that if it were to proceed, that there be appropriate geotechnical requirements. I know Council has recently moved to change the way that we monitor the excavation impacts on surrounding residents, and I would implore the panel to take that into account if they were to go against what's in the papers. That's all I was to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, so that is the objectives registered. I now have two registered speakers on behalf of the applicant, Ben Little Perfect and Brian Black, the applicant. With the letter which is take the lead on behalf of announce yourself. Once again, the 3 minutes does apply, but I would invite you to address the issues raised by the objectors directly, and on that basis, when you're doing that, then there may be some discretion in terms of extra time to address those matters properly.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair and panel members. Basically, all the issues raised, apart from traffic, have been dealt with or could have been addressed as a condition of consent. As noted in Council's report, page 400, section 8, referrals, Council's engineers, heritage, fire safety, environmental health, and the New South Wales Police are all happy with our DA. Heritage is supportive, subject to the upper level being set back by 3.9 metres, which is what we submitted in the first place in our original DA in December 2023. As Council requested us in an RFI in July 2024 to change back our plans to our original pre-DA submission, which had a slightly different facade and no setback. So what I'm saying, accordingly, the 3.9 metre setback on level 3 should not have been an issue. So basically, there are two unsatisfactory referrals, namely from trees and traffic. With regard to trees, this deals with a lack of route mapping on a council street tree, which, as you saw on site today, is surrounded by solid surfaces. As advised by our arborist, it would be highly unlikely for a root system to have grown under a solid surface. Equally, it is also unusual of council to request at DA stage the route mapping under a hard surface environment, i.e. our car park area. This too could have been conditioned as a matter of consent. With regard to traffic, council is satisfied with the operational procedures of the hotel. Apologies, I should have shown you on site today the loading zone on the left-hand side of the driveway, as well as the numerous legal drop-off zones that exist. So in a nutshell, I believe that what is preventing the approval of this development is basically the impact of 10 theoretical, and I say theoretical, car spaces. My traffic engineer will address the technical matters after me. What I wish to do is address them from a business and management point of view. Although we tried, it appears that we have no doubt failed to convey to council that there will be a substantial change in the focus of our guest demographic for this new hotel. Our primary focus will be the international traveller. We are less than a week away from Christmas, and our hotel is at 62% occupancy, and our car park, as you saw today, was empty. We should be full. We are in a superb location, but we simply don't attract these guests, as our hotel is currently more akin to a motel than a hotel. We don't offer room service, concierge service, buffet breakfast, restaurants, etc. We simply can't afford any of these amenities. As advised to council, our plan of management will clearly address this new hotel does not offer off-street parking, and that the surrounding areas of the hotel have strict short-term parking controls, i.e. the street parking is only possible for 30 minutes to 2 hours maximum. So should a guest wish to rent a car over their stay, it would be best that they choose another hotel that offers off-street parking. There are numerous hotels that, as you will note in our traffic report, that operate successfully without any off-street parking. there is no reason we can't do as well. Accordingly, we are of the opinion that the impact on Queen Street will be non-existent. We are hopeful that the panel, with an open mind and hearing the above, will as well. Chair and panel members, we love our design of this boutique hotel and think it will be an amazing addition to Queen Street. And whilst most developers are buying hotels to knock them down and replace them with large homes, as Mr. Loxton lives in, we are not. We wish to develop this as a world-class boutique hotel in the heart of Woollahra, not keeping it as a motel. I can assure you the shopping precinct and the revitalisation of this area is certainly in need of this. The eastern suburbs is in short supply of a decent hotel and decent accommodation. Our DA of 43 units hopes to assist this growing problem in our small way. If the panel is with us, in our view that traffic is non-existent, and I hope you are, I respectfully request that the panel approve our application, or at the very least defer this application until end Jan to allow us to update our plans, thereby enabling council to deal with this matter electronically. We have addressed the third level impact via late correspondence. And Mr. Chair, I'd just like to address 3 points that the objectors raised. Firstly, with regard to Mr. Edmonds, I contacted him numerous times to discuss this matter and take him through our plans on objectives. He declined to meet with me, which was disappointing since I'm also a member of Woollahra. Secondly, the fact that the community does not support the hotel is quite disappointing because the hotel is not operating effectively. The community is not there. If we were, we would have a thriving business, but the community doesn't support the hotel in its present state. And thirdly, the impact of local business, well, I just think that that's laughable because a brand new hotel with increased capacity of only 11 rooms, I think will assist with the shopping and the vibrancy of the Woollahra precinct. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Any questions of Mr. Burke? Oh. Ben Liddell, do you announce yourself, please?
Yeah, good morning. Good afternoon, panel. Ben Liddell here from Traffics. I'm the traffic engineer on the behalf of the applicant. So there are only 10 usable compliant parking spaces on site with an average usage of 7.3 spaces per day or 0.23 spaces per hotel room. So if you apply this rate to the proposal for 43 rooms, this equates to a theoretical demand for approximately 10 parking spaces. Now, Council's nominal DCP rate, I believe, I consider, overestimates the parking demands for a hotel and in this location. It's worth noting that these projected theoretical demands are largely driven by the fact that car parking is currently provided on site and that these facilities are promoted by the operator for a fee. I believe Council has incorrectly assumed that guest travel behaviour will be unchanged with the removal of the car parking and that guests will just continue to travel by private vehicle even if no parking is provided on site. As Vaughan has mentioned, a hotel operational management plan will be put in place that clearly states to potential guests that parking is not provided on site and that nearby on-street parking, which is half an hour to 2 hour periods, is not conducive to hotel stays. Guests don't want to be moving their car vehicle every half an hour to 2 hours to try and find another park when they're on holidays. It just doesn't make sense. Guests travelling by private vehicle will make a conscious decision not to stay at the hotel if parking is not provided. Complying with Council's DCP rate would require a large basement garage opening of approximately 7.2 metres and would require 2 to 3 levels of basement car parking. Guests will be fully aware of the hotel's no parking policy and limited public car parking through a site-specific green travel plan, a travel access guide, the website, and booking confirmations. There are excellent public transport options along Oxford Street with connections to the Sydney CBD. The site is ideally located with respect to shops, restaurants, cafes, bars along Queen Street and Oxford Street, and guests can travel to these destinations by foot without the need of a taxi or private vehicle. As stated in our recent letter, there are multiple hotel developments within the vicinity of the site that do not provide any off-street car parking. Notably, the Mrs. Banks Hotel, which is located just down the road on the western side of Oxford Street. And I would consider that the subject site is better located with respect to guest drop-off and pick-up facilities. Servicing demands for the hotel are consistent with the existing hotel operations, and council hasn't raised any concerns in their assessment report. The taxi trips associated with guest drop-off pickup will vary day to day and will be spread across the day based on the guest movements, flight times, etc. And guests may even, walk to Oxford Street for breakfast, just say, and then take a taxi from Oxford Street. So not all taxi trips are going to originate from, the frontage of the hotel. There are multiple existing legal parking areas that taxis and ride shares can utilise, and that map is shown on page 7 of our most recent letter. And it's highly noteworthy that a 6-metre no parking zone could be located at the front of the hotel without losing any on-street car parking. This zone would utilise the existing driveway crossing.
Sorry, Mr. Liddell, if you could just wind up quickly, please.
Yeah, sorry, I've just one more thing. A 6-metre no parking zone can be located at the frontage of the hotel without the removal of any car parking. And that's based on the utilisation of the existing driveway crossing, which will be removed because it's no longer needed, and a proportion of about 1.5 metres of spare curb capacity at the frontage of the site. So there's no loss of on-street car parking, and there's an additional space for taxi passenger drop-off pickups in a no parking zone.
Okay. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Any questions? No. Okay, so that is all the speakers on item 3. I'll now move to item 4, which is EA 208 of 2024.1 for number 5, Hillside Avenue, Hillcrest. I have 4 objectives. From the applicant. I will just again remind that, and I apologise for this, that there appears to be some difficulty in people when they're talking in hearing when the time frame is up. There is a 2-minute warning sound, and then for 3 minutes. And because of the number of speakers, I have been a little bit rigorous on sticking to the time frame for the benefit of everyone in the meeting. And some people have had to be muted after they haven't heard my request to wind up. So if you could just I apologise in advance for that. If you could just be very conscious of the 3 minutes, it does go very quickly. So if you could make your points as quickly as possible on the basis that we have read your submissions. So the first speaker I have on this item is Tony Moody. Mr. Moody, could you announce yourself and advise on whose behalf you are speaking?
Chair and panel members, my name is Tony Moody. I'm a consultant planner, and I was asked to assess the proposed development in relation to my client's property at 7 Hillside, which is upslope and to the east. Originally, my clients wished to retain all their views from 7 Hillside, but after further explanation, my clients are reasonable and intelligent people, and they accepted the fact that there would be some view loss, although regrettable, some view loss. They accept view sharing. On behalf of my clients, I offered mediation discussions with the applicant's architect in July 2024. The response ultimately was a decision has just been made by our client not to amend our design. In other words, the offer of mediation was rejected. I fully support the recommendation by Kai Key of Council, particularly condition D.1a. Kai Key assesses the view loss from my client's property to be severe. I agree. there will be a significant loss of water, views, including Double Bay and Rose Bay. A drop of 1.2 metres is called for, given that the current internal floor-to-floors levels are 4 metres. This is excessive. A drop of 1.2 metres will achieve an internal floor-to-ceiling heights more than the minimum or the recommended 2.7 metres. Kaiki, your assessment officer, or the assessment officer of council, advises that there is ample opportunity to achieve 1.2 metres. Furthermore, a 1.2 metre drop is totally consistent with the 4th step on tenacity. There'll be no loss of development potential of the proposed development, no unreasonable loss of amenity, and importantly, from my client's perspective, there will be a reduction in view loss, although my clients will still suffer view loss. Furthermore, the proposed dwelling with a drop of 1.2 metres will still be unaffected in terms of panoramic views to the west, because the adjoining building to the west is 1 metre below. Furthermore, condition D1C, I would like that to be amended to read not only the photovoltaics being non-reflected, but also the rest of the roof. Panel members, this is a case we're not asking for refusal, but we earnestly request the 1.2 metre lowering, as well as the roof and photovoltaic cells be of a dull, non-reflective nature. Thank you, Chair and panel members.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The next registered speaker is Lucinda Cowdroy. If you could announce yourself, Ms. Cowdroy.
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Hello, panel members. My name is Lucinda Cowdroy and I'm the owner and resident at number 7 Hillside. This is a nerve-wracking experience presenting to you when the stakes are so high for my home. I support the recommendation of the council planner to reduce the height of the proposed new dwelling. And I just wanted to say that even with this compromise, there will still be significant view loss from my home, resulting from not only the increased height from what the existing house that is currently on the site. It is going to be increased even under this compromised position, but also because of the significant projection forward of the roof line of the new home towards Sydney Harbour. However, such view loss is less than the complete obliteration of the water and land views of Rose Bay and Double Bay if the DA, as proposed, were approved. And so accordingly, I do support the council's planner's recommendation of a reduction in height. And I think that represents a sensible and fair compromise in my mind. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Cowdroy. The next speaker I have is Brett Daintry. Mr. Daintry, if you could announce yourself on behalf of the speaker.
Thank you, Chair and panel. My name is Brett Daintry. I'm a consultant planner. I've been instructed by number 3. I made submissions during the DA process and I placed late correspondence before the panel that you should have before you. Our primary objection is to the fact that this proposal provides garaging for 4 vehicles. Garage 1 in particular provides for parking of 2 vehicles. It also encroaches upon the 6 metre setback required between number 3 Hillside Avenue and the subject site at number 5. Not only is that garage encroaching by about 5 metres beyond the 6 metre setback, it's elevated 2 stories above ground level at that point. This fails to achieve the objectives in part 3.9 of the DCP. It's my submission that the applicant and the assessment itself are both deficient in relation to their failure to properly justify the 5 metre exceedance of the required setback or shortfall. And I asked the panel to carefully look at pages 600 to 601 of the agenda. In relation to that, I'd also asked the panel when reviewing pages 600 to 601 of the agenda that you carefully read Part B 3.9, which is the battle axe block provisions. And they are provisions that are in place because the impacts of houses on internal allotments must be considered in a more sensitive way. In relation to landscaping, Mr. Brennan commented on site that condition D1A.3 provided a 6 metre limit. That unfortunately does not apply to the clumping of the vegetation in the northwest corner. That condition applies to 3 trees. They are tropical birch trees that are below number 7 and between number 7 and number 5. You heard my submissions on site regarding the loss of the only view from the pool area and the private open space and internal areas of the house. I won't repeat that. Suffice to say, the clumping of vegetation in the northwest corner will cause unsatisfactory loss of view and is not view sharing as contemplated by Objective 10 under B371 to ensure landscaping allows view sharing. It does not achieve that objective. In relation to, could I take the panel to the landscape plan? First the demolition plan, please. And if the panel could have the demolition plan in front of them, it would be useful.
Anyway, the time is running very short.
Yep. The demolition plan states existing driveway boundary wall to be part retained. This has not been properly assessed. If that occurs, and the fence along that wall, which is a 1.8 metre dividing fence between the driveway and my neighbour's private open space and pool area, is demolished and replaced, as the landscaping plan shows, with climbers trained on metal screens, then anybody walking or traversing the battle axe handle or the driveway inside the site will just look into my client's private open space and pool. That is completely unsatisfactory. Condition D1E must be deleted. It is completely antipathetic to the other objectives of the DCP to maintain privacy to my client's private open space at number 3. I'll leave you to read the rest of my late correspondence. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. The next speaker I have is Lynn Cheney. Cheney, could you announce yourself, please? And you have 3 minutes, which, as you know, I've been ruthlessly applying, so you can bear that in mind.
Good afternoon to the chair and panel, and yes, correct, Lynn Cheney, 3 Hillside Avenue. Thank you very much for attending our home this morning. And as Brett has already stated, I further confirm our concerns around the objections around the new garage structure proposed as part of the new build at 5 Hillside Avenue. The setback of only 1 metre from the rear boundary, from our rear boundary. As I understand it, the battle axe blocks should be set back by 6 metres as it is their front boundary. We see the structure will significantly compromise our privacy with direct line of sight into our living, pool and pool deck areas, as you may have observed this morning. It is also visually intrusive, and it doesn't really create a view corridor between our home and their house at number 5, as contemplated by the development control plan. Additionally, also referring back to the landscaping, as Mr. Daintree had indicated, the proposed landscaping, of course, around their pool garage area, they have clumped all the trees and vegetation in that northwest corner. And although the report says it is a minor impact to our view, we see it as a significant impact to our view, as the images represented in the report is not, I didn't believe is realistic. And you may have noticed this morning upon inspection what this impact would have for us in relation to across to Rose Bay, which is our only view. And thirdly, again, around the concerns of Mr. Daintree's comments around the demolition and the driveway, I won't repeat that. What I would like to also raise is that the retaining wall for the demolition and construction process, if we could request that there's a need for robust conditions imposed on their consent, which puts a weight limit on vehicles that can drive up and down that battle axe driveway during demolition and construction. We do not want that high wall to collapse into our home, which will result, of course, in significant damage. This fear and request isn't really baseless because there is some historical issues around the property at number 5. The existing structure during its construction in 95-96, the wall and boundary between 1 and 5 actually collapsed into number 1. So there is some instability around that site. And also more recently, there is instability on the hill itself with a minor sinkhole which appeared during the demolition process at 8 and 9 Hillside Avenue, which is further up the hill. So there are concerns around that. Thank you very much to the panel, and I hope you'll consider our requests as put forward today.
Thank you. We certainly will. Yes, so
sorry, just a question. Let's get back to Mr. Benjamin. When you say you'd like to see the condition that new one some clause E deleted.
Yes, I might explain that. The effect of that condition would be to limit the fence height on top of the existing, assuming that the words boundary wall to be part retained means that they intend to demolish the existing high fence that is along the battle axe block. And my clients are 3 metres lower than that right-of-way. If you impose that condition from the low side as it's worded, then we would have no fence effectively on top of that wall, which doesn't comply with the Building Code of Australia. You need a balustrade at least, but we need a 1.8 metre high fence on the western side and the return down our boundary on the southern side of number 3 to maintain privacy to the swimming pool area and the private open space of number 3. I would be surprised myself if the applicant did not seek to delete that condition as well. But I also note on the landscape plan, and if you look at the note, climber trained on metal screen, that is an inadequate dividing fence to provide privacy to the private open space of that pool area as well. So it just doesn't work. There's not been sufficient thought given by the applicant to the maintenance of privacy to the pool area and the private open space.
So would it work if we were wanted to impose a condition requiring details of the height, design, materials of fencing on that boundary being submitted to the approval of council prior to construction?
I always have a problem with those type of commissioners panel because conditions panel because of the role of private certifiers. To the extent it's uncertain, I think the panel need to be satisfied itself.
Okay. We'll take that on board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll discuss those requests with council staff during our deliberations. Is all the objectors registered to speak? I have 3 representatives on behalf of the applicant registered: Patrick Shelley, Yehan Chow, and Adrian Mello. If whoever is lead of those applicant representatives, if you could announce yourself and just indicate whether it's yourself or all of you who wish to speak individually. And again, I'll allow some discretion on the time to speak on the basis of that you will be specifically addressing the matters raised by objectors.
Thank you, panel. Sorry. My name is Adrian Mello, consultant town planner, speaking on behalf of the applicant. I'll speak to some of the issues that have been raised by the objectors on behalf of my client. And then we'll move on to Patrick Shee and then to Yihan from Zans the Architects. So firstly, on behalf of my client, I'd like to thank the panel members for the consideration of the DA. I'd also like to thank council for the list of recommendations outlined in the report and note that the client accepts the recommended conditions with the exception of the conditions seeking to reduce the overall building height. Now, in terms of what's been raised by the previous speakers, I'd just like to point out that the request for mediation with 7 Hillside wasn't actually rejected outright. What we initially had proposed to do was to delay that mediation session until such time as we could have a conversation with council around any issues that they had in terms of merit. Unfortunately, that didn't happen until a recommendation was put up to the panel. Then in terms of parking, the existing parking at the moment is located generally as per the existing position of the parking. It's actually located a little bit further eastward of the existing parking location. And it's actually the bit that the panel was standing on when they went outside this morning is that little sandstone area was actually a little bit further westward of where the parking finishes up at the moment. In terms of the adjoining fence, we'd actually support the removal of that or the amendment of that condition and the increasing of its height beyond 1.2 metres. And also because we'd also look to increase the privacy between 5 Hillside and 3 Hillside respectively as well. In terms of other broader issues with the assessment, there's a couple of things we'd like to draw the panel's attention to, noting that Yihan from Zarns will speak to the architectural matters, and I'll be speaking primarily to the view loss impacts. I'll also make reference to the previous information that was submitted to the panel, looking at what a potential amendment of that condition would be and what the view loss impacts would be. The submitted pack provides an impact of a more reasonable height reduction of 600 mil instead of the proposed 1.2 metre reduction. It should be noted the condition identifies a height reduction of 1.2 metres. This is taken from the roof, but it actually doesn't consider the proposed skylight, which achieves an RL of 72.33, and as such, the reduction is in reality 1.8 metres. Whilst the council has considered a wide range of views from adjoining properties from the council assessment report, it appears as though undue emphasis has been placed on views from the shed boundary looking down over the site towards Point Piper and Double Bay from 5 Hillside Avenue. This approach does not recognise the full range of views enjoyed by 7 Hillside that will not be significantly impacted upon by the development, including iconic city skyline views and views of the harbour. With regards to the well-established land environment principles of view sharing, I'd like to make the following points. Although the proposal will impact the water and land interface view, this disregards the extent of other views possible from the property as detailed in the submitted additional information. These views include iconic city skyline views. The view which is identified by the objector and referenced in the council report is from a shared boundary looking down over the site shown at page 16 to 20 of the submitted information. And as identified in the pack, there are a range of other views that are obtained by 7 Hillside which are marginally affected by the proposal. With regards to the reasonableness of the proposal, the height of the proposed dwelling as submitted is 1.47 and 857 millimetres below the maximum building height for the roof and skylight respectively. The proposed amended reduction of 600 mil would achieve a building that's approximately 2 metres below the maximum building height. Additionally, the proposal responded by appropriately locating the site on the site topography by pushing the building as far eastward as possible, resulting in retention of as many views as possible for 7 Hillside. The proposed reduction is 600 mil. The proposal achieves a floor-to-ceiling height of 3.1 for the lower ground floor and 2.7 for the ground floor. And I consider that these heights are exceedingly reasonable for a development in this location with these views and of this quality. In conclusion, with the proposed reduction of building height by 600 mil, the proposal continues to maintain the majority of significant iconic views for the adjoining property at 7 Hillside and delivers a reasonable future family home given the site's location, topography, and significant views. As such, based on the submitted additional information and the matters raised by the client, the architect, and myself, I'd request that the panel members revisit the proposed reduction of 1.2, which is in reality 1.8, and apply a more reasonable height reduction of 600 mil. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? It was.
Actually, I have a question.
Yes.
Sorry, through you, Chair. There's been reference made about the setback of the garage from the rear boundary of 3 Hillside and why it's been reduced rather than if there's a comment from Brett, I think, that said it should have been 6 metres setback. Is that your interpretation of the setbacks for battle axe properties?
Do you want to respond to that or pass your argument? Mr. Mello, did you hear the question? Mr. Mallon, we can't hear you. You're on mute at the moment.
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear. Was that a question towards us, or was that a question towards the council assessment officer? Sorry.
It's a question for you, Adrian, if you don't mind. Mention was made by the objectors about the setback of the garages from the rear boundary of 3 Hillside, but in fact the garages are now closer to the rear boundary rather than being set back the 6 metres as their interpretation of the Battle Axe block setback requirements. As a town planner for the project, could you provide comment on that?
Yeah. So there is a requirement for that setback of 6 metres, correct, in the DCP. However, what we've done is we've consciously located that car park in the existing location of the existing structure, recognising that where it's been located and as it is at the moment still actually preserves views for the adjoining property at 3 Hillside, noting that we've actually set it further eastward than where the existing building finishes. So we've tried to reduce that impact as much as possible, recognising that as we went out on site, you saw that it is a Battle Axe lot. It is the Hillside Avenue is a cul-de-sac that does end, and it is very, very difficult to get parking in that general area because of the location of the site itself. It's worth noting the additional car parking spaces are actually captured as part of the broader GFA of the project as well.
So can I ask us a further question? My further question is, where is it dimensioned that it's set back further than the existing?
So setback, it's set back generally in the same position. So from the northern shared boundary, it's set back generally in the same location. But if you compare the demolition plan with the proposed upper ground floor plan, you'll see that the car park, those two westward-most car parking spaces are actually further east than the existing. So when I say setback, I was referring to the western boundary of the property.
So my question was about the relationship to the rear boundary of number 3.
Yeah, so we're generally in the same location as the existing structures. And yes, it is technically non-compliant with the DCP, but on merit grounds, we think it's justified as supported by council officers.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. And the next speaker is on behalf of the applicant. If you just announce yourself, please.
Hello, good afternoon.
Mr. Chair,
can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Good afternoon, members of the Woollahra Council. My name is Patrick Ashi, and I'm here this afternoon on behalf of the property owner of number 5 Hillside Avenue, Woollahra, Ms. Ming Lu. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to address you regarding our development application. To begin, I would like to emphasize that our sole objective is to build a home, a place for Ms. Lu and her family to reside and enjoy a stable, peaceful life. This will be their primary residence. Additionally, this project holds a special importance for Ms. Ming Lu's family. Her daughter is currently attending Kambala School, which is located nearby. Being able to live close to the school is essential for the family daily routine and provides a significant convenience and support for her daughter's education. We are deeply committed to maintain the character and the harmony of the neighborhood while building a home that reflects our respect for this wonderful community. It is our goal to contribute positively to the area and collaborate with the council and the neighbors throughout the process. Today, my consultants will further present a detailed assessment and a view sharing analysis to request the panel members to consider a modification to the concept condition on the building height reduction. Thank you for your time and our consideration. I hope you will support us in this endeavor and create a family home at 5 Hillside Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chair.
Yes, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you, Chair and panel members. My name is Ihan Kao from Zans Architects, and on behalf of our client, I'd like to thank the panel members for their consideration of our DA and list of recommendations. Our client accepts the list of consent condition, except to the one condition seeking a reduction of the building height by 1.2 meters. I would like to take this opportunity to respond to this condition. It would be helpful if the panel members can refer to the additional submission we made earlier this week relating to the height comparison study as I speak. So the first section you will see is an east-west section of the proposed DA scheme. The blue dashed line indicates the LEP height limit, and the top of the roof edge is the RL 71.72. It is about 1.5 meters below the LEP height. The section also shows the skylight is at a higher RL at about 850 below the LEP height. The proposed floor to floor is 4 meters, which is entirely appropriate for a family home with commanding views of the Sydney Harbour. If you look at next page, the next section shows a 1200 high reduction to RL 70.52. The draft condition also seeks to reduce the skylight to be at same RL. This compromises the integration of the skylight, and the overall height reduction by the draft condition is in fact more than 1800, which was mentioned by Adrian previously.
I'm sorry, Chair. I'll have to mute you with the because my voice can't be heard when people are speaking. Just to ask you, could you just direct the panel to the items that you're talking to? So we have the late submissions, but we're just not quite sure of what you're referring to. So you can direct us to what it is you're thinking, and you can.
Can you unmute yourself, please?
Panel members, would it be helpful if I share that late submission that we sent, as in on the screen, so it will be easier to follow?
Yes, you can do that.
Thank you very much.
Through you, Chair, as well. It's on page 131 of your late correspondence bundle.
Could you please confirm that you can see my screen, share screen?
N31 of the late.
Great. So I'm showing the first section, which is the current DA scheme. As I mentioned before, there's the LEP height of 9.5 meters and the current proposed roof RL of 71.72, and then the skylight at a higher point, RL 72.33. As I mentioned, the floor to floor of 4 meters is entirely appropriate for family home of this size. I'll move on to the next section, which is the draft DA condition, reduces the height by 1200. Also noting that this also means we're reducing the skylight by 1800. So we think that this is amenity reduction that is unnecessary. It would compromise the quality of housing infrastructure, and it will adversely impact on the overall quality and outcome of the architecture. So instead, if you go to the next page, we propose a more nuanced and balanced height reduction of 600 mil. This option will still be 2 meters under the LEP height. Then the next page, here's a comparison starting from the LEP height, followed by the DA scheme, 600 mil reduction in green, draft condition in 1200 in blue, then the existing in red. Now I'll go through some of the view analysis we've conducted. So this is a standing eye height. This is the existing condition view taken from the ground floor of number 7 Hillside Avenue. Next is the LEP DCP envelope, as you can see. And then following that is the DA scheme. Then we have the 1.2 meter reduction, followed by our preferred 600 mil reduction, noting that a wide breadth of the view remains available. We also did the same analysis standing on the first floor of number 7 Hillside Avenue, again existing, followed by the DCP LEP envelope. Then we have the DA scheme, 1.2 meter reduction, 600 mil reduction next. And then lastly, we also did an analysis standing on the rear lawn of number 7 Hillside Avenue, approximately matching the one of the photo that was submitted as part of the objection. Again, here we see the existing, followed by the LEP DCP envelope. Then we have the DA scheme, 1.2 meter reduction, 600 mil reduction. Last but not least, these shows the comparison of the varying height with the preferred 600 mil reduction shown in green. This is standing on the ground floor. This one is standing on the level 1, number 7. And then this one standing on the rear lawn. So from our analysis in high study, the impacts of the DA scheme are primarily limited to the non-iconic views. The iconic CBD, Harbour Bridge, and wider breadth of the views remain available to number 7 Hillside Avenue. And impacts to these iconic views are limited. We consider our proposal to be reasonable response to the site's condition, topography, and the views, with the architecture being appropriate for a house of this scale in this location. So in conclusion, in summary, based on the view analysis of height study presented, we request the panel member to revisit the 1200 reduction, which in reality is 1800 of the consent condition, and consider a more nuanced and balanced reduction of 600 mil. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions of the? Yes.
Mr. Dangerous, his submission was concerned about that wall on the boundary and the fencing above it. Could you comment on that? Thank you, Mr. Kerr.
Yes, I think that is a valid point, and then we can certainly provide clarification around that, and we fully support that comment.
Just one question. Those images that we saw, the height variations, do you know if they've been prepared in accordance with the Land Environment Court protocols, or are they your best efforts?
Yes. Yeah. We did prepare those based on the principle of LAC tenacity view analysis to the eye level of 1.65 meter above the finished floor level, and 35 mil aperture for the camera lens. And then we do have extensive model of the city of Sydney, as you can see on the background of those images that were sent through. And the reason that the images are cropped into 3 is the 35 mil lens, and then we're simply stitching the 3 different view as a panoramic view, demonstrating that there is a wider expansive view actually available. And we're retaining those iconic view, particularly towards the northwest and west of the site.
Thank you. Okay, so that was all of the speakers on item 4. Thank you very much. Yes. And we'll just have a little pause here. We've done chat with one of our members has said to step out briefly. Just while we are waiting, I'll just flag that I have 5 registered speakers here, the order of which will be Benjamin Dybald, Nigel White, Michael Logan, Tim Brown, and Councillor Merrill Witt. So when the panel is fully restored with its numbers, I'll call on Benjamin to speak in the first instance.
Oh, hello. Oh, hello. Yes, I'm just trying to turn myself on so you can see me. I always think that's much nicer. Thank you very much to the council staff who prepared and detailed the report. I'm speaking on behalf of Strata Plan 474, which is 38C Mona Road in Darling Point, neighbouring property of the proposed development. In fact, very close neighbouring property, because our building is within 1.5 metres of the boundary line on which this development is proposed to be undertaken. I'd also like to thank you for the council's recommendation for refusal on heritage grounds based on the contributing item down on Loftus. And I would argue that there's probably a strong case for considering number 2 Loftus Road for heritage listing in its own right, but that's probably a matter for another forum. I feel the case against the current development application should be strengthened beyond that of the immediate threat to the fabric of the HCA. First, I'd like to make reference to the geotechnical report undertaken by Warwick Davies of EI Australia on behalf of the 13 properties spread between 36, 36A, 38 and 38C Mona Road, the gist of which strongly recommends the application of additional controls for this DA given the large-scale excavation proposed. Deep excavations on a 25 to 38 degree slope of sandy substrate in such close proximity to neighbouring properties and heritage items within the envelope of the applicant's site, as well as our own, are not to be taken lightly, and that these should be built into any conditions for the granting of the DA. Mr. Davies states in his geotechnical report submitted in November 23 that the potential geotechnical impacts on 38C Mona Road from the proposed development given the slope conditions are, and I quote, more than very challenging and are in fact actually worrying. Now, geotechnical engineers do not use this language lightly. In response to the report tabled at the meeting today, Mr. Davies is concerned that the contents of his geotechnical report seem to have had only scant recognition, if at all, in the assessment process so far. He cites a number of items. The proposed condition D41, ground anchors. He notes the ground anchors are a critical element of excavation support in the circumstances of this design, yet there is nothing noted against this in the report from Council. He believes the Development Engineer's referral response on page 886 and the statement, Council's Infrastructure and Sustainability Services Division has no objections to the excavation on technical grounds. He raises the same question, have the serious concerns raised in his report actually been considered? The sheer scale of the proposed excavation is of great concern, regardless of the hugely increased land area achieved by the amalgamation of these three lots. I still find it very difficult to see how the concentrated excavation involving 3 floors of subterranean parking with a cut and cover tunnel and above ground 4 floors of habitable space comply with the WMC development controls, which are to design and site buildings to respond to the topography and minimise cut and fill. I'd ask that the panel today to consider this aspect of the design for the proposed development. It's of particular importance as it seems that planning controls related to setbacks from boundaries, particularly the rear boundary, have been given special consideration, which again places a greater risk to the block of flats at 38C. Surely this should be balanced with a reduction to the scale of the proposed excavation works. It seems rather unfair to allow non-compliance in one area because of the shape and topography of the land, yet not to take the same shape and topography in consideration when assessing the degree of permissible excavation works permitted. Similarly, it's fair to assume.
Yeah.
Apologies again to those who I've cut off. You're really not able to see the time limitations, so I do apologise. But we did need to get on with the items. The second speaker I have is Nigel White. Mr. White, if you could announce yourself and please be happy to speak.
Thank you, panel, for hearing me out. I'm representing number 36 Mona Road, Darling Point in particular. This property is located at the south of the subject site and is probably the most impacted by this development. It's understood that there has been no design changes since the DA was initially lodged, and council planning staff are recommending the application be refused, which is supported from the applicants or from the objectors' point of view. However, we feel that the grounds for refusal really need to be expanded and explored. It's not just a heritage issue. We've heard about excavation from Ben, and I think that's well documented. I've also raised that as a concern. I also note that the planning report refers to an erection of a 6-storey building. I hope it hasn't increased in height by 2. And I'm referring to the building to the southeast. This is the one where my comments are directed at. A summary of some pertinent issues are as follows. Building height. A recent Land Environment Court case established the parameters for considering height of buildings. Merriman Investments Pty Limited versus Woollahra Council, LEC 1582, states that existing ground level on a brownfield site must be taken from the excavated ground level below the previous natural contours of the site. And in this case, that results in a building height for a 4-storey building of 13 plus metres. So there is a non-compliance there, and there's no clause 4.6 addressing this issue. The application should be refused on that ground as well. The other issue is pedestrian access to this building, tucked away in the back of the site. It's precarious. It's got a separate pedestrian access to a tunnelled 3-metre driveway with slopes of up to 1 in 5. So I raise concern about the excavation also, which requires 2 basement parking levels to service 3 dwellings plus a building on the other side of the site. The nexus between that building and this car park is questionable, given that the pedestrian access is also precarious, relies on steps and the like. In totality, you've got to raise the question about disabled access, fire egress, given the separation between buildings and the distance of this proposed building from the street. There's also amenity issues which I raise grave concern. This building is only proposed 2.5 metres from the southern boundary. It's pretty outrageous, given that it also requires excavation and reconstruction of retaining walls, which then leaves only tokenistic landscape opportunity around 3 sides of this very big building relative to the space it's been proposed to be placed. And as a ratio between building footprint to landscaped area, it's quite outrageous for the area it's being dedicated to be provided in. The amenity issues that arise obviously are visual and oral privacy concerns we have, as well as overlooking and all created also by the setbacks, and there's also overshadowing impacts as the neighbouring property is situated directly to the south of this 4-storey building.
Mr. White, thank you. That's good.
Was that Mr. White or Mr. Logan?
That was Mr. White. Mr. White. The next speaker I have is Michael Logan.
He hasn't actually got you.
He's not here? Okay. So Mr. Logan not present. So I'll turn to the next registered speaker, Tim Brown. Mr. Brown, could you announce yourself, please? And just bear in mind there's 3 minutes that I will apply.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and panel members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and for taking the time to visit our property earlier today. My name's Tim Brown. I live in a 2nd floor apartment at 22 New Beach Road, immediately to the west of the subject site, with direct views to the proposed building. I'm speaking on behalf of the Strata Committee and owners of 22 New Beach Road. We support the officer's recommendation for refusal, noting the officer's comment the site is unsuitable for the proposed development. We note the application is largely silent on the significant detrimental effects it would cause to our property, and we draw the attention of the panel to the following 4 points. Firstly, the subject site is located in an intensely developed area of Darling Point. The proposal builds beyond the maximum permitted controls on a portion of valuable landscaped open space, to the disbenefit of all surrounding neighbours. The application characterises the land as vacant and overgrown. On the contrary, the land forms an important landscape separation in the rear setbacks of existing buildings. And in recent times, around September 2023, canopy trees, including a jacaranda tree, were removed from the land and habitats for owls and other fauna lost. Secondly, no rear setback is observed by the proposal. The fact the applicant notes strict compliance could never be achieved on a site of this dimension illustrates the unsuitability for the proposal. If all surrounding buildings chose not to observe a rear site setback, it would remove private open space and landscaping, which is written into the controls and characterises the Darling Point hillside of street-facing buildings with rear setback landscaping. A number of the other DCP's objectives are not met, including development following topography, view sharing, landscaping ratios, and so on. Thirdly, excavation proposed is excessive, appears to be undercalculated, lacks accuracy in the use of an approximate ground line, and raises serious concerns about the viability of the proposed scope of removal of the hillside, as one of the earlier speakers undetailed. In light of a recent partial collapse of the existing retaining wall to our property within 2.5 metres of the boundary, the proposed works are very concerning to our owners. The proposed sections do not match the reality of the site conditions as detailed in our recent submissions, and an accurate ground line is also needed to establish the height control. Fourth, we believe that compliance with the ADG is necessary due to number 2 Loftus comprising 2 stories of apartments above a ground floor entry, therefore becoming 3 stories, and the construction of the new apartment, which is necessitated by the demolition and reconstruction of the 4 apartments in 2 Loftus. The ADG sets out a minimum building separation of 6 metres from side and rear boundaries. This is 2.5 metres proposed, and so there's no reasonable amenity having regard to privacy, building separation and open space to the neighbours. In summary, the potential impacts of the proposal are demonstrated to be highly detrimental. We support its refusal. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our final speaker today on this item is Councillor Merrill Witt. Councillor Witt, announce yourself, please.
Thank you very much, panel, and thank you for recommending refusal of this site, which I absolutely concur with. I'd also like to recommend that we strengthen some of the conditions. I think, and just to note from a public benefit point of view, that this DA will potentially have a huge impact on a very special site for not much in the way of public benefit. Only 3 additional luxury apartments. The main reason given for refusing the application is that the proposed partial demolition of the contributing item at 2 Loftus Road does not conserve with the heritage significance of the site or the Mona Road Heritage Conservation Area. In reference to clause 4.10, the Heritage Referral Report says the extensive excavation and new flat building on the landlocked allotment would itself not result in adverse impacts to the heritage conservation and the adjoining heritage items. However, the extensive demolition of the contributing item at 2 Loftus Road to enable the aforementioned works is contrary to the objectives. I would be grateful if the panel would give consideration to strengthening the reasons for refusal by acknowledging that the insertion of a modern day flat building into such a significant site would disrupt the historical and social significance of the site. This reason is supported by the description of Loftus and the Mona Road group in the DCP as being cohesive in character and having a substantial presence on the slopes of Darling Point. It also says it represents a trend towards closer subdivision and development of fashionable flats in Darling Point during the 1920s. Each building was designed by prominent architectural firms of the time in the interwar Mediterranean style, and they're unified in their design. The description of the Mona HSA also refers to a cohesive group of substantial but speculative housing built within the first decade of the 20th century. Also, the report highlights other heritage items, either adjoining or in close proximity, including Guelo and 36 Mona Road and 38 Mona Road, which is located to the southwest. So I think the architectural character of the existing buildings will be compromised by the new flat building due to its location. It disrupts the cohesiveness of the area, diminishes the surrounding green space, and from a Borough Charter point of view, diminishes the social and historical significance of a very influential era in Australian architecture. I'm also concerned about the statement about the retaining walls. I think this is because they're also mentioned as being heritage items, and I think that this development should impact it. And I'd also just briefly, sorry, I'm almost finished, just like to draw the panel's attention to the Council's preliminary geotech report on page 859, which refers to instability of the site on multiple occasions, importantly identifying 8, instability of the overall hillside slope, and it goes on and on and on. And I just like to note, we've seen recent examples where developers have got the excavation risks wrong and have had to amend their DAs. In this case, that could potentially be catastrophic. Also, I know the council report says the consolidated site is not technically a battle axe lot because it's being consolidated. but let's not forget that the only way to access it is through a tunnel. It's a very, very problematic site. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Councillor. That is the end of the public meeting. We've heard from all our speakers, who I thank for your involvement. And those matters raised by all the speakers will be taken into consideration in the panel's deliberation of these items. So I will now close the public part of the meeting. As I said, the panel will now go into a session on considering all items that were on the public meeting agenda and the electronic agenda, and the minutes of council's the panel's decisions and our reasons therefore will be available on the council's website as soon as possible. So once again, I close the meeting at 3:25 p.m. Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, no, I still haven't. Still get through them.